examine the making of the 40.
In the chill winds of northern Canada, a new car begins its first secret tests. For the once proud Jaguar company, this will be make or break. In 1980, the firm was in deep trouble. Its identity was sunk in the morass of British Leyland. It was losing £50 million a year, and it was turning out shoddy cars. The company should have sunk. Instead, with another £100 million of government money, it set out to build a new car which would restore Jaguar's pride and prestige. This is the story of what happened.
The future is here. The future is now.
This is Coventry a month ago. Jaguar dealers from around the world have their first encounter with the XJ40. 6 years in the making, the brainchild of Chief Executive John Egan.
Jaguar was losing a lot of money. People couldn't quite see how we could keep going long enough to bring out a new car. And also there was a lot of discussion as to what kind of new car we should make. Certainly a lot of the advanced technology people were saying, gosh, there won't be any large cars in the future. Nobody's making cars with big engines. And it seemed at the time really quite a big problem for anybody to invest £100 million plus in a car company that was losing £50 million a year, and also into a technology that had an awful lot of uncertainty about it.
The key was the American market. In Los Angeles, Jaguars were only selling 50 cars a year in 1980. Yet when other UK manufacturers were pulling out of the States, Egan told his dealers he was here to stay.
It was like an evangelist meeting. I'd announced that Jaguar had introduced the round tyre to its North American dealers, and it would raise great cheers, and then the radio aerials that would go up and down, and so on and so forth. And by the time we'd finished, really there was a great deal of energy and noise in the room, and they were cheering, and you'd thought that we'd just launched a new model.
Before any new model could be launched, Egan's first priority was to sort out the reliability problems on his existing range of cars. And it wasn't until late 1982 that the first hand-built prototypes of the XJ40 hit the road, in the utmost secrecy. This is March 1983. At Timmins, Ontario, in the subarctic wastes of northern Canada. The 40s are under a heavy disguise of body masking. Canadian drivers have been hired to work alongside the British engineers who'd built these prototypes. In this business, secrecy is obsessive. The sleek Jaguar lines have had to be hidden under anonymous padding because rival firms also test up here and would love a sight of the new Jaguar. There's a thriving industry in snatched pictures, so the test team are taking something of a risk in allowing us to film the cars without their masking, and certainly in taking the 40s on the Trans-Canada Highway. Jaguar headquarters back at Coventry were not amused. This piece of film of the undisguised cars has had to be locked up in a safe until now. David Lees from Coventry is the engineer running the tests from a support vehicle.
Cat litter 2, Alicat, do you read over?
Yes, I read you, David.
Yeah, I was wondering if you fancied a bit of lunch soon now.
Sounds good, David, but I've got this squeak from my right rear wheel right now.
I'm not quite sure what it's about.
Okay, I'll perhaps if you could pull over somewhere safely, please, and we'll have a look at it.
Roger.
Jaguars, even prototype Jaguars running in sub-zero temperatures, are not supposed to squeak. Roar possibly, but not squeak. So every single noise, however tiny, is thoroughly investigated.
Had squeaking for the last mile or so, David.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's quite the same thing as with the wheel bearing problem we had.
This is what the tests are all about. These cars are entirely new. Not a single nut or bolt is the same as on any previous model, so every component is under the severest scrutiny. Both cars carry a mass of computerized monitoring equipment, and the drivers keep an extensive tape-recorded log of everything that crops up. The fault will be investigated by the backup team at Timmins when the cars return at the end of the day. This kind of intensive testing is new to Jaguar. There will eventually be dozens of cars which will be tested all over the world. On the original XJ6, there were only ever a couple of prototypes. They never left the leafy lanes of Warwickshire, and they certainly never received this kind of rigorous treatment.
We've just come in now and we've cleaned them all down, and we're now going through our standard service schedule and maintenance schedule, which involves the lads working to a standard sheet such that they know exactly what regular maintenance is required, and then based on what the drivers tell me from their tape recorders, I can write them out a rectification list. This is a real test in the environment. We can drive cars in low temperatures, and we can also subject them to the day-to-day conditions of that natural environment. It's something that you just can't do in a very clinical sort of tunnel test. At present we're doing 356 miles a day, and we hope to do something like 21 consecutive days of mileage, which will give us somewhere around 7,500 miles on each vehicle.
It's 6 a.m. and it's rather cold. The temperature is minus 43 degrees centigrade. The cars are left out every night. Everything will now be tested and must work first time. In conditions like these, the engine may run beautifully, but the car can still be completely immobilized because a door lock is jammed or a windscreen wiper frozen. The offending part may have been made and supplied by somebody else, but it is Jaguar that the frozen motorist will curse. In early '83, the theme of the 40 is high-tech, and an ultra-modern saloon mustn't succumb to a cold night.
Okay, Bob. Right.
Level 30 seconds.
Main B. Yes, front fogs. Okay. Okay, that's wiper.
Timmins is such an insular town that there's only one restaurant serving lunch. Everybody else goes home. Yet the locals have become so used to strange cars that not a head turns nor an eyebrow is raised as the Jaguars cruise through at the start of another day's trials. At Gaydon in Warwickshire, it's a different story. This is September 1983, almost a year after they started the tests in Canada. This former airfield, used by BL for vehicle testing, is a favourite target for pressmen keen to get first pictures of a new model. Hereabouts, security is a real problem. Prying eyes, not to mention cameras, are not welcome. It'll be a long time before Jaguars want anyone to see this car. Gaydon's value is in the range of facilities it offers. You can try out the toughest road conditions without having to go halfway around the world to find them. And if you want some high-speed work, the motorway track is just next door. And it's a finder out of weaknesses. The Canadian Squeak is back, although this is an entirely different car. At Brown's Lane in Coventry, Jaguars have paid the ultimate compliment to one of their German competitors. They've pinched a good idea. It's to build a pilot or prototype assembly line to learn how best to make the car. No one in Britain has done anything like this before.
Right there. It's bloody tight. Yeah?
Every backlight I've done so far, we're getting it tight. We're getting 10 mil down here. And
What's that? And I would tell you now that's as good as any Series 3 you've ever seen. You know. Yeah, to ask a guy to weld in there and get that perfect square, that's perfect square. If it calls for something dead square, then somebody's got to go underneath and weld from underneath. You know.
Right. Whatever.
Which is nearly impossible, but you know, nevertheless, something's got to be done.
It's the end of 1983, and the top men from Jaguar's various plants around the Midlands are meeting weekly on the new assembly line to iron out production problems.
we've got to come up with an engineering situation.
But even in the most sophisticated setup, there's still room for a spot of good old-fashioned British working practice. Even within their own factory, security is tight. There's a private security force, and the 40's production line is a closely restricted area. The combination of the new car and the new technology is providing more than a fair share of headaches for project manager Malcolm Oliver.
All of the time we're looking at every single problem, and we have to treat everyone with the utmost priority. We're having problems in particular with say, the bumper fit, whereby the technique was established that we build the bumpers up off the cars at track side and then offer them as a complete assembly with a very limited number of fixings to retain them. What we have now found is that the guide blocks on the body cannot be assembled properly, and as a result we're having to redesign those. That involves body modifications and new injection mouldings, so a fairly extensive change, which at this stage perhaps might appear to be a very late feature.
Not far from Coventry, the Motor Industry Research Association runs an experimental centre. Any manufacturer can test his cars here on the worst surfaces imaginable or on high-speed circuits. The first Jaguars off the pilot assembly line have come here to take a pounding. It's a furious time for trying out cars and components, because at the end of 1983, everyone at Jaguar is expecting Egan to launch the 40 the following October. Samples of every component which Jaguar buy in are now exhaustively put through their paces before they go anywhere near the new car. If they don't stand up, they go back. It's one of the ways in which Egan has set about restoring Jaguar's tattered reputation for reliability. The 40's new engine makes its first appearance virtually unannounced. It slipped into service via the new XJ6 Cabriolet. Public Relations Director David Boole.
It gives a good experience.